Amara Achafer was sitting on the church steps with a Bible in her lap and a war in her eyes when the black Maybach pulled up to the curb. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She just watched the rain run down the tinted window, waiting for the door to open. When it did, out stepped the most dangerous man in Detroit, 6'2", charcoal suit that probably cost more than the church's annual budget, jaw like a blade, eyes the color of a winter sky that's decided to kill you. Elliot Crane, billionaire. CEO of Crane Development, the man who'd bought up half of Gratiot Avenue and was coming for the other half. The man who made grown politicians nervous and rival CEOs sweat through their shirts. He walked straight toward her. Each step echoed on the wet concrete like a countdown. Amara stood up. She was 5'6" in flats. She looked like a strong wind could knock her over. She didn't move. "Mr. Crane," she said. Her voice was steady as church bells. "I've been expecting you." Elliot stopped 3 feet away. Something flickered behind those gray eyes, surprise maybe, or something older, something that looked almost like pain. "Never met," he said. Amara smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that said, "I know things about you that would make you sick." "No," she said, "but we will." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph, old, faded, the edges burned brown. A baby in a nursery, flames in the background. And a young black man with hands wrapped in bandages, holding that baby like it was the only good thing left in the world. She held it up. "That's my father," Amara said. "Reverend James Achafer. And that baby in the fire, that's you, Elliot." The rain seemed to stop. The whole world seemed to stop. And Elliot Crane, the man who owned 47 buildings and 0 hearts, felt something inside his chest crack open like a door that had been locked for 33 years. But before he could speak, his phone rang, unknown number. He answered. An old man's voice, papery, cold, familiar as a scar, whispered into his ear. "Don't touch her, boy. She's your sister." Now, if that didn't stop you in your tracks, if your heart didn't just do something stupid, then this story might not be for you. But if you're sitting there wondering how a pastor's daughter and a billionaire CEO end up connected by fire and blood and a lie that could burn them both alive, then stay right here. Don't move, because what I'm about to tell you will make you angry. It'll make you cry. And it'll make you believe just for a second that love really can survive anything, even fire, especially fire. But before we get into it, if you're new here, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Tap the bell. I drop stories like this every single week. Stories about real people, real pain, and real love that doesn't play by anybody's rules. You do not want to miss what happens next. I promise you that. All right. Let's go back to the beginning, to a church on Gratiot Avenue, to a fire 30 years ago, and to a baby boy who had no name, no family, and no idea that the woman sitting on those steps was about to change his entire life. This is the story of Amara and Elliot, and it starts with a demolition notice. 72 hours before that photograph changed everything, Elliot Crane was standing in his penthouse in Greektown, staring at a piece of paper that said his whole life was a lie, not the paper itself. That was just a demolition order signed, sealed, delivered for a church on Gratiot Avenue. New Hope Baptist. Built in 1952 by black hands. Sitting on a plot of land worth $11 million in today's market. No, the lie was bigger than the paper. Elliot set it down on his marble countertop and poured himself 3 fingers of Macallan 25. The scotch cost more than most families on Gratiot made in a month. He drank it like water, like it could wash something off his tongue. "Really doing this?" said a voice from behind him. Sujin Park was leaning against the kitchen island, arms crossed, thermos of Americano in one hand. She was 33, sharp as a paper cut, and the only person at Crane Development who wasn't afraid of Elliot Crane. Not even a little. "Doing what?" Elliot said without turning around. "Tearing down a church, in the middle of Black Detroit, in 2024. Sujin took a long sip of her coffee. "You know the optics on this, right? Mayor Duggan already called twice. The NAACP sent a formal letter, and your own board of directors is losing their minds." Gerald from accounting literally cried in the hallway yesterday. Gerald cries at everything. He cried when the stock went up 2 points. "Elliot, Sujin," she set the thermos down with a click. "I've worked for you for 6 years. 6 years, I've watched you buy buildings, burn contracts, and make grown men cry in conference rooms. I've watched you smile while companies folded, but this one feels different. This one feels personal." Elliot finally turned around. His jaw was tight. His eyes were flat. "It's business," he said. "It's not. It's always business." Sujin shook her head. You know what your problem is? You think if you buy enough land, tear down enough buildings, destroy enough legacies, you'll feel something, anything. But you won't, because the thing you're really trying to destroy isn't out there on Gratiot Avenue. She pointed at his chest. It's in here. Elliot stared at her. For a second, the mask slipped, and underneath was a 35-year-old boy who'd been in foster care since he was 2, who'd never once been held by someone who didn't want something from him. Then the mask came back. Book the car, Elliot said. We go to Detroit tomorrow. Sujin blinked. Tomorrow? You never go anywhere tomorrow. You plan everything 6 months out. You once scheduled a lunch meeting 3 weeks in advance because you didn't trust the restaurant to still be open. I said tomorrow. She held up both hands. Fine, but I'm driving. You scare the Uber drivers. Last time you took a cab in New York, the guy asked if you were in the mafia. I didn't answer him. That's what made it worse. Elliot almost smiled. Almost. It was more like a crack in the wall, there and gone in half a second. But Sujin saw it. She always saw it. The next morning, they rolled into Detroit in a black Escalade. Sujin drove because she said Elliot's driving energy made her nervous, which really meant she didn't trust him not to speed through a school zone. Elliot sat in the back, scrolling through files on his tablet. Property records, tax liens, the whole sad, ugly history of New Hope Baptist Church. The church had been bleeding money for 11 years. The roof leaked in 3 places. The foundation had cracks you could fit a fist into. The congregation had shrunk from 400 members to 60, most of them elderly, most of them too poor to leave. But the land was gold, $11 million worth of gold. Sitting in the middle of a neighborhood that was supposed to be revitalized, which was a fancy word for priced out. Elliot's grandfather, Aldrich Crane, had been trying to buy that block since 1994, right after the fire. Right after New Hope Baptist burned to the ground and 3 people died inside, a white social worker named Catherine Crane, her husband Richard, and an unborn child that never got a chance to draw breath. The official report said electrical fault. Faulty wiring. Tragic accident, but Aldrich knew better. And now, sitting in the back of that Escalade, watching Detroit roll past the window like a movie he'd seen too many times, Elliot knew better too. Because somewhere in those files, buried under 30 years of lies and cover-ups, was the truth about what really happened that night. And it had something to do with him. He didn't know how yet, but his chest had been tight for weeks, like a hand squeezing from the inside. They pulled up to New Hope Baptist at 10:47 a.m. The church sat on the corner of Gratiot and Mack, red brick gone gray with age, the fire escape hanging off the side like a broken rib. A hand-painted sign out front read, Community meals Tuesdays, GED classes Wednesdays, youth boxing Thursdays, all welcome. God loves everybody. Stepped out. The air hit him, rain and car exhaust and fried chicken from the carryout next door. A city bus rumbled past. Somewhere down the block, a kid was laughing so hard it echoed off the buildings. Charming, Sujin said, climbing out behind him and adjusting her glasses. Real charming. You could turn this into condos. Charge $2,200 a month. The yuppies in Royal Oak would fight each other for a unit with a vintage church aesthetic. Start. I'm just saying this place has character. You could keep the steeple, make it a rooftop bar. The spire. Very Instagram. I'm not turning it into condos. Sujin raised an eyebrow. Then what are you turning it into? Elliot didn't answer, because the truth was he didn't know, and that was the problem. That had always been the problem. He could destroy anything, build anything, control anything. But he couldn't figure out why his chest hurt every time he thought about this church. He walked toward the front steps, and that's when a basketball hit him square in the chest. Yo, you lost, mister. Elliot looked down. A skinny kid with a bruise on his left cheek, a gap where his front tooth used to be, and a grin that could light up the whole block was bouncing a ball on the sidewalk. I'm not lost, Elliot said, rubbing his chest. I'm looking for the pastor. Pastor James ain't here. He's at Detroit Receiving Hospital. Chemo day, Tuesday thing. The kid, couldn't be more than 17, squinted up at Elliot like he was sizing up a threat. You that demolition dude, right? The billionaire from the news. Who told you that? Everybody knows, man. Miss Amara put it on the church marquee last week. Said, come and get it, Mr. Crane, we're ready. The kid laughed, a real laugh, loud and unbothered. She's wild, bro, you ain't ready for her. What's your name? Deshaun Williams. I box here, I read here, I get in trouble here. He shrugged like it was a resume. It's home. Elliot looked at the church, at the sign. At the kid who called a crumbling building home, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Something twisted in his gut. Something old and unfamiliar. "Take me inside, Deshawn." The inside of New Hope Baptist was small but warm. Hardwood floors that creaked under every step. Stained glass windows that threw colored light across the pews, red, blue, gold. A piano in the corner that looked like it hadn't been tuned since Bill Clinton was president. The walls were covered in photographs, baptisms, graduations, funerals, church picnics. A whole life pinned up and proud. And sitting right in the middle of it all on the front pew, legs crossed, reading a book like she owned the place, was Amara Ackhafer. She was wearing a yellow sundress. Locks pulled up in a crown, a thin gold chain with a tiny cross. No makeup except something on her lips that caught the light. She didn't look up when Elliot walked in. "Late," she said. "Never met," Elliot said, same words he'd said outside, but they felt different now. Heavier, Amara closed the book, marked the page with her finger. Looked up, and Elliot felt the floor shift under his feet. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they held something he hadn't seen in a long time. Not fear, not anger, not the usual calculation he got from people who wanted something from him, recognition, like she'd been waiting for him, like she knew him before he knew himself, like she'd been sitting on that pew for 30 years, just holding the space. "Sit down, Mr. Crane," Amara said. "We have a lot to talk about." Sujin leaned over to Elliot. "I'll be in the car, don't do anything stupid." "That's literally your job," Elliot muttered. "My job is to keep you out of prison, not out of trouble. Those are different things." Elliot sat down on the pew. The wood was warm, like someone had been sitting there right before him. Amara studied him for a long moment. Then she said, quiet as a prayer, "You look like her." "Who?" "My mother, Catherine." Name hit Elliot like a truck. Catherine, his mother's name. The woman who died in the fire. The woman he'd never met, never seen, never known, except in the dreams he'd had since he was 5. Dreams of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes, holding him in a room full of smoke. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice was thin, paper thin. "Yes, you do." Amara stood up and walked to the back of the church. She disappeared through a door and came back a minute later with a manila envelope. Thick, old, the kind of thing you keep in a lockbox under your bed. She set it on the pew between them. "Open it," she said. Elliot's hands were shaking. He hadn't shaken since he was a kid. He hated it. He opened the envelope. Inside were hospital records. St. Luke's Medical Center, Detroit. Dated November 14th, 1994. A baby boy, no name, brought in by a James Ackhafer. Injuries, smoke inhalation, malnutrition, degree burns on both hands. His hands. Elliot looked down at his own hands. The hands that had signed billion-dollar deals, that had gripped steering wheels at 140 miles per hour when the rage got too loud, that had pushed people away his entire life. They were shaking. "My father pulled you out of that fire," Amara said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "He ran inside while everyone else was running out. He found you in the nursery under a fallen beam. He carried you 6 blocks to the hospital. He held you for months secretly because your grandfather was a powerful man, and if he'd found you, he would have taken you and raised you into something monstrous." She paused, swallowed. "So my father gave you to the state. And he spent 30 years building this community center on this exact land, waiting for you to come back." Church was silent. The stained glass threw red and gold light across the pew. Somewhere outside, Deshawn was still bouncing his ball. The rhythm was steady, like a heartbeat. Elliot stared at the records, at the burned hands, at the name James Ackhafer written in shaky penmanship. "Why?" His voice broke, actually broke like a boy's. "Why would he do that? Why would any of this? Because he loved your mother." Amara's eyes were wet now, but she didn't blink. "Not like that. She was his friend. The only white person in the neighborhood who fought for us, who brought food, who helped families escape bad landlords, who sat in this church and listened when nobody else would. And when she died trying to save a family, the Washingtons, my father swore he'd protect her child, even if that child grew up to hate him." She reached across the pew and put her hand over his. Her skin was warm, steady. "Not here to demolish this building, Elliot. You're here because some part of you has always known. Some part of you has been coming home. That night it rained, not a little rain, Detroit rain, the kind that turns streets into rivers and makes the whole city sound like it's crying. Amara made coffee in the church basement. Terrible coffee. The kind that tastes like it was brewed during the Clinton administration and left to ferment. She poured 2 cups and set them on a folding table between a water heater and a stack of old hymnals. They sat across from each other. The rain hammered the windows. The basement smelled like concrete and old wood, and something sweet, jasmine maybe. Or maybe that was just her. Elliot told her things he'd never told anyone. About the foster homes, 7 of them before he was 12. About the couple in Flint who locked him in the basement when he was 6 because he wouldn't stop crying. About the rage, how it started as a whisper and became a roar, how he learned to make people afraid because fear was the only thing that felt like power. About the 20-year plan. How he'd been buying up property in Detroit for 5 years, not to gentrify but to protect it. How every building he acquired he secretly shielded from Aldrich's shell companies. How the demolition of this church was supposed to be a test, a cover to find out who saved him. "Been looking for you," Elliot said. His voice was raw. "For years, I didn't know it, but I was." Amara told him about Deshawn. About the kid who came to the boxing program at 13, skinny and scared, with a black eye and nowhere to go. About how she sat with him every Thursday and helped him read. About how he wrote poetry in a notebook he hid under his mattress and would die before he let anyone see it. About her father. About his hands, how the burns never fully healed, how he still couldn't make a fist, how he preached every Sunday with those ruined hands open, palms up, like he was still offering something. "He never regrets it," Amara said. "Saving you, not for 1 second. He told me once, he said, that baby had Catherine's eyes. I couldn't leave him in the dark. But he lied to me. My whole life, he lied to protect you. There's a difference, Elliot, a big one." They looked at each other across that table. The coffee was cold. The rain was loud. The basement light buzzed overhead like it was tired of watching. And Elliot Crane, who hadn't let anyone close in 33 years, who had built a fortress out of money and control and rage, leaned across the table and kissed her. It was soft, slow. Like a question he'd been afraid to ask, Amara answered. Her hand came up and touched his face, his jaw, his cheek, like she was memorizing him. Like she'd been waiting 30 years to do this. And for 5 seconds, just 5, Elliot forgot about Aldrich. Forgot about the empire. Forgot about the fire. Forgot about every wall he'd ever built. Then his phone rang. The sound was loud in the quiet basement. Like a gunshot, unknown number, he pulled away from Amara. Looked at the screen. Answered, an old man's voice, papery, cold, familiar as a scar you can't stop touching, whispered into his ear. "Don't touch her, boy." Elliot's blood went cold. "She's your sister. If that didn't wreck you, if your chest didn't just cave in, then I don't know what will. But here's the thing. That phone call, that's not the end. That's the beginning of the worst part. Because what Elliot doesn't know yet, what Amara has known since she was 19, is that the truth is worse than a lie. And the lie is worse than the truth. And the man on the other end of that phone, he's been playing this game for 30 years, but we'll get to that. If you're still here, if you're still breathing, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Tap the bell, and I promise you, you are not ready for what comes next. The lies get deeper. The love gets harder. And a man who thought he had nothing left, he's about to find out he had everything. Elliot stood in the basement of New Hope Baptist, phone pressed to his ear, and felt the whole world turn to ash. "That again," he whispered. Aldrich Crane's voice came through the speaker like smoke, thin, curling, impossible to grab. "You heard me, boy, the girl, the pastor's daughter. Amara, she's Catherine's child, your mother's daughter, your half-sister." A pause, then a sound that might have been a laugh. "Did you really think it would be that easy? Did you think you could just walk in there and take what's mine?" The line went dead. Elliot stood there, the phone still against his ear, the rain still hammering the windows. Amara's hand still warm where it had touched his face 3 seconds ago. He looked at her. Amara was watching him. Her dark eyes were wide, not with fear, but with something worse, understanding. Like she'd been waiting for this call too. Like she'd known it was coming and had been holding her breath for it. "Elliot," she said softly. "What did he say?" He couldn't answer. His throat had closed. His chest was a fist tight, squeezing, crushing every word before it could reach his mouth. He put the phone in his pocket. He didn't look at her. He walked past her, past the folding table, past the cold coffee, past the water heater and the old hymnals. He walked up the stairs, through the church, past Deshawn, who was still bouncing his ball on the porch, and he got in the back of the Escalade. "Go," he told Sujin. "Go where? Anywhere. Just go." Sujin looked at him in the rearview mirror. She didn't ask questions. She never did when his eyes looked like that, flat, dead, like someone had turned off the lights behind them. She drove. They didn't speak for 45 minutes. Then Sujin said, quiet as a whisper, "You okay?" "No," to talk about it. "No, cool. I'll just sit here and pretend I'm not watching the most powerful man in Detroit fall apart in my backseat. Very professional of me." Elliot almost laughed. It came out as a breath, short, sharp, broken. He stared out the window at Detroit rolling past. The city looked different now. Not the city he'd been building against for 20 years. Not the enemy. Not the puzzle he was trying to solve. It looked like home. And that terrified him more than anything. For 3 days, Elliot Crane disappeared. Not physically, he was still in the penthouse in Greektown, still in his charcoal suits, still signing documents and making calls. But the man inside, the one who'd sat in that church basement and let a woman touch his face, gone, locked away, buried under concrete and control, he accelerated the demolition timeline, called the contractors, told them to move up the date New Hope Baptist comes down in 2 weeks, not 6. He told Sujin to draft the paperwork. He told the board to approve the land acquisition. He told everyone, including himself, that this was business. It wasn't business. Sujin knew it. She'd known it since the church. She'd watched Elliot Crane, the man who once fired a CFO for chewing gum too loud, sit on a church pew and cry like a kid who lost his mother, and then kiss a woman like she was the only heir left in the room, and then get a phone call that turned him into a ghost. On day 3, she walked into his office without knocking. "We need to talk. I'm busy. You've been busy for 3 days. You haven't eaten. You haven't slept. You sent an email to the entire board that just said the word proceed with no context. Gerald from accounting thinks you're having a stroke." Elliot didn't look up from his laptop. "I said I'm busy, Sujin." She walked around the desk, stood in front of him, crossed her arms. "Not destroying that church," she said. "Excuse me. You heard me. You're not tearing down New Hope Baptist. You're running from that girl, and you're using a wrecking ball to do it." Elliot's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know you haven't slept in 3 days. I know you've been staring at that photograph, the one she showed you, the baby in the fire, every time you think nobody's looking. I know you called St. Luke's Medical Center yesterday and asked for the original 1994 intake records, and when they said they were sealed, you didn't push. You just sat there, like you were relieved." She leaned down, close, her voice dropped. "Elliot, you're not a villain, you never were. You're a scared kid who got handed the wrong story and believed it for 33 years. And now the right story is sitting on a church pew in a yellow sundress, and you'd rather burn the whole block down than go back and face her." Office was silent. The city hummed outside the window. A siren wailed somewhere on Gratiot. Elliot looked up at her. His eyes were red, not from crying, from not sleeping, from holding something in for so long it was eating him alive. "She's my sister, Sujin." The words came out like glass. Sujin blinked. "What?" "My grandfather called. He said Amara is Catherine's daughter, my mother's child. We share a mother." He swallowed. "Half-siblings." Sujin sat down in the chair across from him, slowly, like her legs had forgotten how to work. "Oh," she said. "Oh, Elliot, don't. I'm not going to say it'll be okay because I don't know if it will, but I am going to say you don't know that for sure. Aldrich Crane has lied about everything since the day you were born." "Why would you believe him now?" "Because he doesn't lie about things that don't matter. He only lies about things that can destroy me. And this," Elliot's voice cracked, "this would destroy me." Sujin was quiet for a long time, then she said, "Then go find out, go to her, ask her. Don't let an 82-year-old man on a phone call decide your whole life." Elliot stared at her. Then he stood up, grabbed his keys. "If I'm not back in 2 hours," he said, "call the FBI. You're dramatic. I'm Detroit." He was out the door before she could respond. Amara wasn't at the church, she was at his penthouse. Elliot walked into the lobby of Crane Tower and the doorman, a big guy named Earl who'd been working the front desk for 11 years, looked at him like he'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Crane, there's a lady here. Says she knows you, been waiting since noon, won't leave." "What's her name?" Amara Akafer." Elliot's heart stopped, then restarted, then stopped again. He took the elevator up. The doors opened, and there she was sitting on the leather couch in his living room, legs crossed, Bible in her lap, looking like she owned the place. She was still in the yellow sundress. Different day, same dress, like she'd been ready. "You look terrible," she said. "You broke into my penthouse. The doorman let me in. I told him I was your wife. You're not my wife. Yet, but give it time." She set the Bible down. "You disappeared, Elliot. 3 days, no calls, no texts. You sent Sujin to tell me you were indisposed. Indisposed, like you're the Queen of England." "I was processing." "Processing what? The fact that your grandfather told you were related? Or the fact that you kissed me and then ran like I was on fire?" He flinched. She saw it. "Down," Amara said, not a request. He sat, she moved closer. Not touching, just close enough that he could smell jasmine and old books and something warm underneath both. "I'm going to tell you something," Amara said, "and I need you to not run, not spiral, not call your grandfather back, just listen." "'Kay, known since I was 19. My father told me. He told me who you were, who he was to you, and he told me about the call, about Aldrich, about what he'd say." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking in her lap. "I've been waiting 5 years for that phone call, Elliot. 5 years, because I knew that when it came, you'd do exactly what you're doing right now." "What's that?" "Running. The word hit him like a fist. "I'm not running," he said, but even he could hear how thin it sounded. "You are. You've been running your whole life, from foster homes, from feelings, from the truth. You built a billion-dollar empire because you thought if you owned enough of the world, nobody could own you." She reached out and took his hand. "But you can't own your way out of this one, Elliot. This one's in your blood." He looked at her hand on his, small, warm, steady. "If he's right, if we're really, then we figure it out, together, like adults. Not like scared kids who let an old man on the phone decide their fate. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what it feels like to find out everything you believed was a lie." "I don't." Amara's eyes flashed. "My father lied to me my whole life, Elliot. He told me I was his biological daughter. I found out I was adopted, left at his church by a woman who died in that fire. I wasn't even related to the man who raised me. And you know what I did? I didn't run. I sat down. I cried. And then I went back to the church the next morning and taught Deshawn how to read. Because that's what love does. It doesn't run. It stays." The penthouse was quiet. The city glittered below. Somewhere, a church bell rang, probably from one of the old Catholic churches on Jefferson Avenue. Elliot looked at Amara Akafer, this woman who'd broken into his penthouse, who'd called herself his wife to a doorman, who'd been carrying a secret for 5 years and still showed up, and he felt the last wall crack. Not break, crack, like ice in spring, like something was getting ready to thaw whether he wanted it to or not. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "The roof." Roof of Crane Tower was flat, open, and 30 stories above Detroit. The wind up there was different, sharper, cleaner, like it had been washed by the lake. The skyline spread out in every direction, the Renaissance Center glowing blue, the Detroit River dark and wide, Belle Isle sitting in the middle like a secret. Amara walked to the edge, looked down. "Insane," she said, but she was smiling. "Probably." They stood side by side, not touching, just there, two people on top of the world pretending the ground wasn't pulling at them. "Tell me about her," Amara said. "Catherine, your mother, tell me what you remember." Elliot closed his eyes. "Dreams, that's all I have. Dreams of a woman holding me, dark hair, kind eyes, a room that smells like smoke. She's singing, I think she's singing, and then the room gets hot and she pushes me under something. A bed, a table, I don't know, and then she's gone." His voice was barely a whisper. "Had that dream every year since I was 5, every single year on the same night, November 14th. Amara turned to him, her eyes were wet. "That's the night she died," she said. "November 14th, 1994, the fire. You know that," my father told me. He said she used to sing that hymn, "Precious Lord, Take My Hand," every time she came to the church. He said she sang it the night she died, while the fire was spreading, while she was pushing families out the back door. Amara wiped her eye with the back of her hand. "She died saving people, Elliot. And then your grandfather erased her, erased all of it, made it look like an accident. Made it look like she didn't matter. Mattered. They stood there. The wind pulled at Amara's locks. Elliot's suit jacket flapped behind him, and for the first time in 33 years, Elliot Crane didn't feel like he was standing alone on top of something. He felt like he was standing next to someone. He reached for her hand. She took it. And this time, when he kissed her on the roof of his tower, 30 stories above the city his grandfather tried to own, it wasn't soft. It wasn't slow. It was desperate, hungry. Like two people who'd been drowning and just found air, Amara pulled him closer. Her fingers gripped the back of his jacket. She kissed him back like she was angry, not at him, but at the world that kept trying to take this from them. The Detroit wind howled around them. The city glowed below. And for 10 seconds, just 10, nothing else existed. No blood. No fire. No grandfather. No lies, just this. Then Elliot's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again he pulled away, took out the phone. 3 messages from Sujin. The first said, "You need to come back, now." Second said, "Aldrich sent a package to the church. It's addressed to Amara." The third said, "Elliot, it's Catherine's diary, and there's something in it you need to see. I'm sorry." They drove back to Gratiot Avenue in 12 minutes. Elliot broke every speed limit on Woodward. Amara didn't tell him to slow down. The package was sitting on the church steps. Brown paper, old, tied with string. No return address. Just a name written in shaky handwriting. "Amara, from your mother." Amara picked it up. Her hands were trembling. They sat on the steps, the same steps where it all started, and she opened it. Inside was a leather journal. Small. Worn. The pages were yellow and brittle, and the handwriting inside was beautiful, looping, careful, like someone who wrote letters the way other people breathed. Catherine Crane's diary. Amara read the first page out loud. Her voice shook. "November 1st, 1993. I found out I'm pregnant. Richard doesn't know. He can't know. The baby isn't his. It's James's. God forgive me, I don't regret it. I love him. I've always loved him. But this child is proof of a love the world will never accept, so I'll keep the secret. I'll raise this baby as Richard's, and James will never know. Amara stopped reading. She looked up at Elliot. Her face was white. She was pregnant, Amara whispered. Before the fire, she was pregnant with me, Elliot said. His voice was hollow. I'm not Richard's son, I'm James's. Amara shook her head. Read the next page, please. Amara turned the page. Read. November 10th, 1993. The baby came early, a girl so small, so perfect. James held her and cried. I named her Amara Grace in Igbo, because that's what she is, Grace, but I can't keep her. Aldrich would take her. He'd use her. He'd raise her to hate everything James is, so I'm leaving her at the church, at the nursery, where James will find her, where she'll be safe. World stopped. Amara looked down at the diary, then at her own hands, then at Elliot. Not Catherine's daughter, she said. I'm not James's daughter. I was left at the church by a woman I never knew, a stranger who died in that fire. I'm nobody's blood, Elliot. I'm just me. Elliot stared at her. And what did Aldrich mean when he said? He meant what he always means, control. If he can't own us, he'll make sure we can't love each other, half-siblings. That's the one line that would stop us. That's the one wall he knew we couldn't climb. But then Amara turned another page, and her face changed. Elliot. What? There's more. The last entry. Dated November 13th, 1994, the day before the fire. She read it. James came to me today. He told me he knows about the baby, the boy. He said he found him in the nursery after the fire started. He said the baby isn't Richard's. He said the baby is his. I told him yes. I told him the truth. He said he'll take the boy. He'll raise him as his own. He said, Catherine, let me protect what we made. And I let him, because I trust him, because I love him, and because I know that boy will grow up to be something extraordinary, something that burns brighter than the fire that tried to take him. Amara closed the diary. She looked at Elliot. Not James's son either, she said. Catherine wrote it, the boy from the nursery, the baby James pulled from the fire. That baby wasn't James's. That baby was left there by someone else. Catherine doesn't say who, she just says he was left at the church. He was always meant to be found. Elliot's hands were shaking again. Then whose son am I? Amara put the diary in his lap, took his face in both her hands. Nobody's son, Elliot. You're not Crane. You're not Achafer. You're not anyone's blood or anyone's sin. You're just you, the boy who was left in a nursery and pulled out of a fire by a man with burned hands. And that's enough. That's always been enough. They didn't get to say more, because Deshawn came running up the block at full speed, sneakers slapping wet concrete, face twisted in a way Amara had never seen before. Miss Amara, it's Pastor James, he collapsed. He was preaching and he fell, Miss Amara. He fell and he's not. The kid couldn't finish. He was crying. 17 years old, gap-toothed, tough as nails, crying like the world had ended. Amara was on her feet in a second. Elliot was right behind her. They drove to Detroit Receiving Hospital in 8 minutes. Elliot ran 3 red lights. Amara didn't tell him to stop. James Achafer was in a bed on the 4th floor, thin as paper, oxygen mask, IV in both arms. His burned hands, those ruined, beautiful hands, were resting on top of the blanket, palms up, like he was still offering something. Amara sat beside him, took his hand. Papa, she whispered. I'm here. James's eyes fluttered open. He looked at her, then past her at Elliot, standing in the doorway, afraid to come closer. Boy, James said. His voice was barely a breath. Come here. Elliot walked to the bed. His legs felt like lead. James reached up slowly, painfully, and took Elliot's hand, held it. Know what Aldrich told you, James said. I know what's in that diary, and I know what you're thinking. You faked the DNA test, Amara said. Not a question. James looked at her, smiled. It was the saddest smile Elliot had ever seen. I faked everything, baby, the DNA. Adoption papers, the story about Catherine leaving you at the church. None of it was true, not the way Aldrich told it. He coughed. Amara wiped his mouth. You're not Catherine's daughter. You're not my daughter. You were left at my church by a woman named Grace Washington, the neighbor. She died in that fire. She had a baby girl and nobody to leave her with. I held you first. That was enough. That was always enough. He squeezed both their hands, Amara's and Elliot's, together. And you, Elliot, you're not my son. You're not Catherine's son. You might not be anybody's son, but you're mine. You've been mine since I pulled you out of that fire. And no man, not Aldrich, not God, not the devil himself, gets to take that from me. Monitor beeped, steady, slow, like a countdown. Amara leaned down and pressed her forehead to her father's hand. I know you lied, Papa, she whispered. I've always known, and I love you for it, every single lie. Because every lie was just another way of saying, I choose you, I choose her. I choose us. James closed his eyes. Then choose each other, he breathed. Before I go, choose each other. If you're still here, if your chest is tight and your eyes are wet and you need to know what happens next, do not move. Do not scroll. Hit that subscribe button right now. Tap the bell, because what comes next is the one that breaks the internet. Elliot walks into Aldrich Crane's mansion in Grosse Pointe Farms with the FBI, a box of evidence, and 30 years of rage. And Aldrich. Aldrich looks his grandson in the eye and says the words that change everything. Now let's get into it. James Ackhafer died at 4:47 a.m. on a Thursday. The rain had stopped. The hospital room was quiet except for the beep of the monitor, slow, steady, like a heartbeat that had forgotten how to hurry. Amara was holding his left hand. Elliot was holding his right. And Reverend James Ackhafer, the man who ran into a burning church when everyone else ran out, the man who carried a baby boy 6 blocks through smoke and ash, the man who spent 30 years building a community on stolen land with burned hands and an unbroken heart, looked at them both and smiled. Not a sad smile. Not a scared smile. A done smile. The kind of smile a man wears when he's finished the hardest job of his life and knows he did it right. You too, James whispered. His voice was so quiet Amara had to lean in to hear. You stupid, beautiful, stubborn children. Papa, don't talk, Amara said. Tears were running down her face, dropping onto his blanket. Just rest. Been resting for 30 years, baby. I'm tired of resting. He looked at Elliot. You, come closer. Elliot leaned down. His jaw was tight. His eyes were dry. He'd used up all his tears 3 days ago in that church basement, and he hadn't gotten any new ones. That scared Amara more than the crying would have. James took Elliot's face in both burned hands. The scars were rough against Elliot's skin, like sandpaper, like memory. I lied to you, James said. About everything, the DNA, the adoption, the blood. I lied because the truth was too dangerous. Aldrich would have used it. He would have taken you both apart, and I couldn't let that happen. You were protecting us, Elliot said. His voice cracked on the last word. I was protecting love. There's a difference, James coughed. Amara wiped his mouth. Love doesn't care about blood, Elliot. It never did. I pulled you out of that fire because you were a baby, not because you were Crane, not because you were Ackhafer, because you were alive, and alive things deserve to be loved. He looked at Amara, then back at Elliot. So love her. Love her like the world is on fire, because it is. It always is. And the only thing that matters, the only thing, is who you're standing next to when the smoke clears. Monitor beeped. Once. Long. James Ackhafer closed his eyes. And the man who saved a billionaire's son, who built a church out of ashes, who lied and stole and broke every rule God ever wrote just to keep 2 kids together. Let go, Amara screamed. Not a word. Not a name. Just a sound, raw animal, torn out of somewhere below her ribs, that filled the whole hospital room and spilled into the hallway and made a nurse drop her clipboard and a security guard look away. Elliot didn't scream. He just held on tighter. Held James's hand like if he let go, the man would fall back into the fire. And for the first time in 33 years, Elliot Crane cried. Not pretty. Not quiet. Ugly, shaking, full-body sobs that bent him double in that hospital chair. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep it doesn't have a name. A place where the foster kid and the billionaire and the orphan and the grandson all live in the same room, and none of them know how to survive without the man who held them all together. Amara put her arm around him, pulled him close, pressed his face into her shoulder. And they sat like that, 2 people who weren't siblings, weren't blood, weren't anything the world had a word for, and they grieved the only father they'd ever had. James Ackhafer was buried on a Saturday. The funeral was at New Hope Baptist. Of course it was. The church was full, 400 people, standing room only, spilling out onto Gratiot Avenue. Deshawn was there in a suit that didn't fit, crying into his sleeve. Sujin was there in the back row, pretending she had allergies. The whole neighborhood was there. The carry-out owners, the barbers, the women from the Tuesday meal program, the kids from the boxing gym. Elliot stood at the back. He didn't go to the front. He didn't speak. He just stood there in a black suit, hands in his pockets, watching Amara deliver the eulogy. She was magnificent. She stood at that pulpit, the same pulpit where James had preached for 30 years, and she didn't cry. Not once. She talked about her father's hands. About how he used to hold them up during sermons, palms open, like he was showing the congregation his scars and saying, "This is what love costs. This is what it looks like." And it's worth it. She talked about the fire, about the baby in the nursery, about a man who could have walked away but ran toward the flames instead. And then she looked at Elliot, right at him, across 400 heads and 30 years of lies. My father told me once that love is not a feeling, Amara said. It's a decision. You decide every morning to stay. You decide every night to come back. You decide when the world tells you to let go to hold on tighter. She paused. Papa, I decided. Every single day. I decided to love you. I decided to love this church. And I decided 5 years ago on a rainy Tuesday when a man in a black suit walked into my church and looked at me like I was a ghost he recognized, I decided to love him too. Church was silent. So rest now, Papa. You held on long enough. We've got it from here. Elliot's vision blurred. He blinked, looked away, looked back. Deshawn, standing 3 rows ahead, turned around and gave him a nod. Just a nod. Like he was saying, I got you, Mr. Scary Suit. Something in Elliot's chest, something that had been locked for 33 years, unlocked. Not all the way, not yet, but enough. The war started on Monday. Elliot walked into Crane Tower at 6 a.m. and told Sujin to close the door. I need everything, he said. Every shell company, every offshore account, every bribe, every kickback, every property Aldrich stole, I need all of it. Every document, every email, every recording. Sujin stared at him. Elliot, that's 20 years of evidence. Some of it implicates you. I know. You could go to prison. I know. Sujin. He sat down across from her, looked her in the eye. My father, James, he gave up his whole life to protect me. He burned his hands. He lost his church. He lied to everyone he loved. And I spent 33 years trying to destroy the thing he built. I owe him. I owe Amara. I owe that kid Deshawn who bounces a basketball on my chest and calls me Mr. Scary Suit. He leaned forward. Owe it to the baby in the nursery, the one nobody claimed. The one James pulled out of the fire. That baby deserved better than what I gave him. So I'm giving it back, all of it. Every dollar Aldrich stole, I'm taking it back. And I'm burning his empire to the ground. Sujin was quiet for a long time. Then she opened her laptop. Been compiling a file for 6 months, she said. I didn't know why. I just knew something was wrong. Aldrich's been moving money through a network of churches, black churches in Detroit, Memphis, Atlanta, buying them, burning them, flipping the land. It's a pattern, 20 years, 43 properties. She turned the screen toward him. I also found something else, Catherine's trust. The one Aldrich never found, it's worth $2.3 billion. It was set up before she died. Beneficiary, her children. Plural, children. Elliot blinked. Plural, you and Amara. If you're both Catherine's, but wait, Sujin frowned. The trust documents say children of Catherine Crane, biological or otherwise. The word otherwise is underlined, twice. Elliot stared at the screen. She knew, he whispered. She knew James would take me, she knew I wouldn't be her blood, and she wrote me into the trust anyway. Catherine Crane, Sujin said, was either the smartest woman in Detroit or the most stubborn, possibly both. Elliot almost smiled, almost. Me the FBI, he said. The confrontation happened on a Wednesday. Grosse Pointe Farms. Aldrich Crane's estate. A white colonial mansion on Lakeshore Road with columns and a wraparound porch and a view of the lake that cost more than most people's houses. Elliot drove himself. No Escalade. No Sujin. Just him in a black suit with a manila folder under his arm and 30 years of rage walking beside him like a dog that finally got off its leash. The front door opened before he knocked. Aldrich Crane was standing in the foyer. 82 years old, white hair, cashmere sweater, cane in one hand, and a look on his face like he'd been expecting this, like he'd been waiting for the boy to come home and burn the house down. Well, Aldrich said, look who finally grew a spine. I didn't come to talk, grandfather. Never do, you just break things. Aldrich stepped aside. Come in then, let's get this over with. I've got a chess game at 4. Elliot walked in. The foyer was marble and oil paintings, cranes going back 5 generations. Every face looked the same. Cold, certain, like they owned the air you breathed. They sat in the library. Leather chairs, fireplace. A bottle of Macallan 25 on the side table, the same scotch Elliot drank in his penthouse. The same scotch that cost more than most families made in a month. Aldrich poured 2 glasses, pushed one across. Drink, he said. You look like hell. I look like you, 30 years ago. Aldrich's hand paused. Then he smiled. It was the worst smile Elliot had ever seen, warm on the outside, dead underneath. You think you're different from me, Aldrich said. You think because you cry in hospital rooms and kiss pastors' daughters you're better. But you're not, boy. You're exactly what I made you. Angry, hungry, willing to burn the world down because somebody hurt you when you were 2. You didn't just hurt me. You erased me. You stole my name, my mother, my father. You took a baby out of a nursery and turned him into a weapon. I gave you a purpose. You gave me a prison. Elliot set the manila folder on the table. 47 counts, he said. Fraud, arson, identity theft, bribery, racketeering, and 3 counts of involuntary manslaughter, the families you displaced when you burned those buildings. The Washingtons, the Carters, the people Catherine died trying to save. Aldrich looked at the folder, didn't touch it. You think the FBI cares about a few dead tenants? I think they care about $2.3 billion in untraceable money moving through a network of shell companies you've been running since 2003. I think they care about the fact that you've been buying black churches in 6 states and demolishing them to build luxury condos. And I think they care very much that the man who signed off on all of it is sitting right here, drinking my scotch in my grandfather's house. Aldrich set his glass down. Slowly, carefully, like a man defusing a bomb. Turn in your own blood. You're not my blood, you never were. James Ockhafer pulled me out of a fire. He burned his hands for me. He lied for me. He died for me. And you, Elliot leaned forward. You just sat in this chair and watched the world burn and called it business. Front door opened. 4 FBI agents walked in. Led by a woman named Agent Diane Holloway, tall, black, no-nonsense, the kind of agent who made witnesses confess just by raising an eyebrow. Aldrich Crane, she said. You're under arrest. Aldrich looked at Elliot, then at the agents, then back at Elliot, and for the first time, the very first time, Elliot saw something in his grandfather's eyes that wasn't control, fear. You were supposed to be nothing, Aldrich whispered. I made sure of it. No name, no family, no future. You were supposed to be nothing. Elliot stood up, buttoned his jacket, looked down at the man who'd spent 82 years trying to erase him. I was supposed to be nothing, Elliot said. But I chose to be something, and that's the one thing you can never take from me. They cuffed him, let him out. The Macallan sat on the table untouched. Elliot walked to his car, sat in the driver's seat, put his hands on the wheel, and he shook, not from fear, not from anger, from relief. His phone buzzed. Amara. Is it done? He typed back. It's done. 3 dots, then. Come home, Elliot. I made coffee, the terrible kind. He laughed, actually laughed, out loud, in the car. Alone, and it sounded like freedom. 6 months later, the church on Gratiot Avenue was gone. In its place stood something new, red brick and glass and a roof garden where tomatoes grew next to hymn books. The sign out front read, Catherine Crane Center for Community and Justice, free meals, GED classes, youth boxing, a legal clinic, a food pantry. And on the 2nd floor, a small museum with 1 exhibit, a baby photograph, a pair of burned hands, and a letter that said, he was left at the church. He was always meant to be found. Elliot stood on the roof that Tuesday evening, watching the sun go down over Detroit. The sky was orange and pink and gold, the kind of sunset that makes you believe the world is trying to tell you something. Amara came up behind him. She was wearing a white dress, simple, no jewelry except the cross. Her locks were down, she looked like a painting. Starring, she said. I'm allowed, you're my wife. Technically, we're not married yet, the officiant is late. Deshawn's late, he's the officiant, he's 17, he's always late. He's not late, he's nervous, he's never officiated a wedding before. Officiated my funeral. Well, James's funeral. He did fine. Amara laughed. That bell laugh, sudden and bright, that Elliot had fallen in love with on a rainy Tuesday in a crumbling church. She took his hand. Elliot, yeah, I'm scared. He looked at her. Of what? Of being this happy. It feels like the fire's coming back. He pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. Fire's not coming back. The fire's done. We're what's left, and what's left is better. Roof door banged open. Deshawn walked out in a suit that still didn't fit, holding a Bible and a ring box, looking like he was about to throw up. Okay, Deshawn said. I'm ready, I think, Miss Amara, you look wow. Mr. Scary Suit, you look okay, you look scary, but like happy scary, that's new. Just do it, Deshawn, Sujin called from behind him. She was in a blazer, holding a phone, recording everything. I need this for the group chat. Deshawn cleared his throat, opened the Bible. Dearly beloved, he said, his voice cracking on beloved. We're gathered here today to join these two who are definitely not related. I triple-checked in holy matrimony. Which is basically a really serious promise to never stop showing up. Amara was crying. Elliot was crying. Sujin was definitely crying, but pretending it was allergies. Deshawn looked at them. Gap tooth, bruised cheek, 17 years old and officiating the wedding of the most powerful man in Detroit and the pastor's daughter he was never supposed to love. Mr. Crane, Deshawn said, do you take this woman to be your wife? To love her, protect her, and never let her make coffee alone again. I do, Miss Amara. Do you take this man who is still kind of scary to be your husband? To love him, forgive him, and make sure he eats something that isn't scotch for breakfast? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the internet, basically, I pronounce you married. You can kiss her, Mr. Scary Suit. She's been waiting long enough. Elliot kissed her. And this time, on the roof of the Catherine Crane Center, with Detroit glowing below and Deshawn cheering and Sujin crying into her thermos and the whole neighborhood watching from the street, it wasn't desperate. It wasn't hungry. It was home. Later that night, after the reception, after the cake, after Deshawn gave a toast that made everyone cry and laugh at the same time, Elliot and Amara walked back to the church. The building was quiet. The stained glass threw colored light across the empty pews. The piano in the corner looked like it was waiting for someone to play. Amara walked to the wall behind the pulpit. There, painted in gold letters, the same gold as the cross around her neck, were the words, "What the fire could not take, love returned." She touched the letters, turned to Elliot. "Your father wrote that," she said. "James, he painted it the night before he died. Told me not to tell you until you were ready." Elliot, read it. Read it again. Let the words sit in his chest like embers, warm, not burning. "He was right," Elliot said. "About all of it. Blood doesn't make family. Fire doesn't make ash. The only thing that survives everything, racism, lies, cancer, betrayal, 33 years of nothing, is the stubborn, stupid, beautiful decision to love someone anyway." Amara leaned into him. "So what's the lesson, Mr. Crane?" He thought about it. About the baby in the nursery. About the burned hands. About the church that almost died and didn't. About the grandfather who tried to erase him and couldn't. About the pastor who lied and saved. About the girl who broke into his penthouse and called herself his wife. "Lesson," Elliot said, "is that you don't have to be anybody's son to be somebody's everything. You just have to show up every day, even when it scares you. Even when the world says you're nothing, you show up, you hold on, you choose." He kissed her forehead. "And you make terrible coffee. You make it every morning, and that's enough." Amara laughed, cried, held him tighter, and outside on Gratiot Avenue, Detroit hummed its low, steady hum, the sound of a city that's been burned 100 times and still standing. Still breathing, still believing that tomorrow might be better, because love returned. It always does. If this story hit you, if it made you angry, made you cry, made you call somebody you haven't talked to in a while, then do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button. Tap the bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because I've got more stories. Stories about people who were told they were nothing and became everything. Stories about love that doesn't care about blood or money or what the world says is right. And every single one of them starts the same way, with somebody who refused to let go. See you next time.